Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Angela Francis. I'm the Assistant Dean of General Education and First Year Experience. I'm joined by a wonderful group of people. Many of you may be familiar with Emily Jennings, your facilitator in NSO or New Student Orientation. And so she's here to help me answer your questions. I'm also joined by Blessina and Molly from the events team. I am extremely grateful for both of them being here. And we have Tammy here to interpret. I do not envy her trying to interpret my speech, but I am very grateful. So thank you. And thank you to each of you who is joining us on this evening. I know that there are a lot of things going on for each of you as we gear up for the semester. And so I hope you find this webinar and all of the others, part of orientation, useful to you as you prepare. So let's get started. Just some general rules. This should be old news to you by now if you've been to any of our other webinars just far. But if you have a question for me about the topic of the webinar, you're going to want to click that Q&A button. If when you look at the menu, you do not see a Q&A button, look for an icon toward the right that's got 3 dots and says more on it. When you click that, you should then be able to see the QA button. If you want to chat with each other, answer some questions that I might pose during the course of this webinar, or if you find you have technical issues, please use the chat for any of that. So I will try to peek into the chat, but when you have true questions you want to make sure are hit during the QA session, please do put them in the QA area. Also, we have one more webinar for you as part of orientation this coming Thursday. Start Strong Resources to Help You Thrive at CUNY SPS, where we will be sharing with you some resources, generally free, that are available to you at the school as a CUNY student. I am going to also share some resources related to time management with you now, all of which will have free options, because I am a big believer in finding those low or no cost possibilities to see if these things work for you. And if they do, then you can move on to looking at things that are paid versions. So here's what we'll cover. I have a favorite metaphor for time management. That is the kitchen metaphor. So I'm going to be using that as we talk today. I'm also going to be talking about energy over time because you hear a lot about time management. But if you think back over the times that have been most difficult for you, sometimes the problem isn't just that there's not enough hours in the day. It's that you don't have enough energy to do everything you have on your list. We're going to use that kitchen metaphor to talk about meal prep and planning in the scheme or framework of organizing your life, as well as giving grace primarily to yourself in this conversation. And we'll talk about the possibility of rebuilding your menu. So let's start with that kitchen metaphor. If you think about the things many of us have in our kitchens, if we even in a New York kitchen, which I can tell you is not the most glamorous, as I'm sure most of you know. We have things sometimes on the stove at a simmer, and that's things that require sustained but active attention. And so if we think about your classwork, sometimes that can be working on a group project over the course of the week, right? You need to keep an eye on the course of the week. You can't just go away. And it's not something that's one and done. You have to keep working on it over a period of time. Then there's things that are on a boil. So that's when you've got, for example, a deadline coming. That paper is due in 2 days and you just had your computer die. What are you going to do? Oven. You've done the active work and now you just have to wait. So you've submitted your work and you are waiting for feedback from your professor. And the microwave, which can count for lower energy shortcuts, but that can sometimes lead to less positive results. And we'll talk more about that later. But the key is just like when you're thinking about what you're going to eat, sometimes we, at the end of the day, may not have the energy to make a whole meal and find one of those frozen microwavable meals. And we recognize there's a trade-off for that convenience. And of course, you have a refrigerator. That can be things you've prepped ahead of time, but it can also be things that are past their best by date. So, in this metaphor, things that are a bit late, for example, or resources that used to work for you but don't work anymore. So, when we're thinking about how we're organizing our time with this metaphor, think about these five categories of things in your life. What's at a simmer that you have to think about? If you have a kid, if you have a child, that's something that's at minimum at a simmer, right? You always have part of your brain on what's going on with your child. Sometimes maybe your child has a crisis. Well, that's no longer a simmer. So that's just one example. Or if we're thinking about graduation, right? Well, if you have family coming in, because I'm already visualizing this for you. If you have family coming in from out of state, what are the things you need to do to help them manage themselves to get to celebrate you? Because we all know sometimes that's the case too. So again, think now. I can think for myself. What's on high heat? What's in the oven? What's simmering? And what, if anything, do you have that is in the fridge for far longer than it should be? I'll give you one more example. So for myself, high heat right now is orientation. That's something that's requiring an attention and energy from Emily and myself. Something I don't need to work on right now. I've done the work. I have something that's going to be published. I already did all the writing for that. I just have to wait. What's simmering? Well, I have a project that I'm really interested in, working on a resource for all of you for mid-semester. That's requiring some attention over time, but it's not in crisis. And what's rotting in the fridge? Well, for me right now, unfortunately, those are some hobbies. I haven't been able to touch them for a while. So I would be curious about each of you, and this is a moment where I'm going to ask you to think about this in the chat. Do you have anything on high heat for you right now? Something where it is pedal to the metal time for you? Is there anything you can think of? And if so, just go ahead and drop it in the chat. This, completing the assignments for orientation. Indeed. Indeed. That's a fantastic example. That's right. That due date on the 25th. Yes. Certifications at work. Indeed. And is there anything for anyone that right now you're using learning time management? I love that. That's a great example. Getting orientation done. What about something that right now you find yourself taking a bit of a shortcut? So you've accepted maybe the results won't be as great as you know you're capable of, but for now, you're being kind to yourself and you're saying it's okay. So what's something that you're saying, you know what? We say perfect is the enemy of done. So you're saying, you know what? It just has to be done. It doesn't have to be perfect. Meal prep and housework, yes. Your diet. Those things tend to be some of the first things we get rid of, right? Working out. Do you guys see a pattern here? We're prioritizing these and very important things that we're thinking about our future. I'm assuming, though I shouldn't, that many of you are here because you've got a goal, maybe with your career, maybe you want to give something like an example to a family member. And so really moving forward with school is super important to you right now. But because you have something new on a boil, you're cutting back on something else. And if you look in the chat right now, it's all personal, right? Kickboxing, boxing classes, exercise, your diet, working out, housework. So if you think about what we have, that assignment that we have in orientation, that time management worksheet, right? When you notice at the bottom of that worksheet, it looks at how much time per week you're spending on, for example, leisure. One thing we often notice in orientation is that leisure and family time and sleep and um, housework, those tend to be the areas because something has to give, right? Those tend to be the areas where we end up microwaving. And the thing to remember with this metaphor and with life is remember, so I'll use diet and I'll be speaking for myself here. In the moment, that microwave meal tastes delicious, seems good enough, and there's all benefit. But if you eat nothing but microwave meals for years, your doctor's going to be mad at you. Um, and so that is the same situation with these examples you're giving, right? For a little bit, for a sprint, you can say, you know what? I'm going to have a little bit less family time. I'm going to have a little bit less um, exercise time. But if you were to do that over the long term, there would be impact. And so remember, you don't want to always keep the same things in the microwave, metaphorically or literally. Thank you all for participating in the chat with that question. And I'm just going to pause here for a moment because I'm very aware that as we hit the beginning of the semester, it probably feels like you have a lot of things on a boil at the same time. And I do not want to ignore that. This is what Thanksgiving prep sometimes feels like for me. And the beginning of the semester can feel the same mentally, right? And so my goal is to help you think about how to avoid this feeling, literally or metaphorically, though I'm afraid I cannot help you with your holiday cooking. So let's talk about energy over time for a second. Let's do an energy audit, right? Because this is your real budget when we're talking about time management. Yes, time is indeed a problem, but this prioritizes aligning work with energy levels and not just with time. And that involves physical energy. So there's things where you're just going to be falling asleep at the end of the day because you've had such a day. You do not have the physical energy to navigate something. There's emotional energy. So, without going into details, there's a lot of news coming out that it's very hard to be neutral about, regardless of your priorities, your politics, your beliefs. And some of that, depending on how close you are to it, can be costing you emotional energy, worry, anxiety, stress, right? That means you have less stress that you can navigate, can deal with before you really start to feel it in your courses because you only have one source of that energy, and you're allocating it to the different parts of your life. And so be aware of that. Be aware of midterms, right? What's going to happen during midterms? How can you try to protect some of your emotional energy? How can you lean on your support system to help you around then? Because you may need some of that for your coursework. And there's also obviously mental energy. So there can be times where I'm actually feeling really happy. I'm really awake and put me in front of some work and I'm like, oh, I can't focus on this. That's mental energy. So things to think about, you know, you can't time block your way out of an energy deficit. And I did see there was a question about where that time management sheet was. I will show you how to get to it during the Q&A so that you are aware. But I do want to highlight, right? What we are asking you to do is essentially time blocking. But as you are doing this, look at what you've done and look at what the impact might be on your energy. So if you are someone who is now allocating 4 hours of sleep a night, and I'm not exaggerating, we've had people do that before. Well, what is that going to do to your physical energy over time, right? You can't, well, I will speak for myself. I can't do that for 15 weeks straight. I can do that for a week, but I'm a bit too old now for 15. And so it means you can have these great plans, but as someone was mentioning, it's easier to put these on a spreadsheet than it is to follow through with it in real life. And sometimes the reason for that is one of these three types of energy. So keep an eye on that as you're doing this exercise in orientation. I also want to highlight that some uses of energy are more sustainable than others. So one of the things that people often slap themselves into are these ideas of, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? Right? If you are an extrovert, the saying goes, you feel restored after spending time with people. If you are an introvert, you feel a little bit drained, even if you had a great time. And some people would take issue with those definitions, but often that's how people are using those words, right? I feel energized with people. So if that's you, maybe choosing something leisurely or family time will actually boost up some of your energy, not necessarily physical, but emotional, maybe even mental, depending on which you do. Think about how you can recharge your battery across the week and across the month. And this is key. I think that I know for me, and I've noticed for many of our students, we sometimes hear about the grind culture, right? It's important to grind, it's important to hustle. But it's also important to remember that you should not need to be resilient all of the time. If you find that you need to be resilient every day, that means you're low on these three types of energy, right? Because resilience is about being able to withstand challenges. Ideally, what you should have in your life are periods where you have to be resilient and then periods where you get to recover. And so look at your life. Think about, what does recovery mean for you? Does it mean taking a walk outside? Does it mean playing a video game? Does it mean spending time with your child? What are things you can do to help recharge that battery? Because eventually, if you continue to try to be resilient once you run out of that energy, you burn out. Burnout is a sign you are running out of empty. Resilience is your warning that you are heading there. So I want to highlight this. When you are burnt out, that is not a personality flaw. It's not a sign that you are not gritty enough. It's not a sign that you are not trying hard enough. Because, like I said, resilience is supposed to be used in cycles. And hustle culture really can impact how we think about this and what expectations we place on ourselves. I want to take this moment to recognize many of you are balancing multiple full-time responsibilities, or even just like I was when I was going to school, multiple part-time responsibilities. You are doing more than 100%. That means that if that becomes your normal and you need a rest, it's very easy to have negative self-talk. And I'm hoping that some of these tools, some of this structure helps you really recognize when that starts to happen, so that you can tell yourself, wait a second, is the standard I'm holding myself to feasible? It's not about should, is it feasible? And I want to highlight another thing. Lack of support can reduce your options. So if you are someone who, let's say, doesn't have a very supportive family, for example, that's a source of support that you cannot lean on. Um, if you don't have a lot of money, that is financial support that you can't lean on. Each of those things means that you are relying on resilience a bit more than someone with more of those sources of support. And that's part of why when we talk about growth mindset, we talk about it as sources of support, because the more sources of support you have, the more options you have for how you navigate and manage your energy and therefore your time. Let's talk about some things you can do on your own in terms of methods and tactics, because we put those within the things that can help you in that growth mindset, strategies, and continuing to improve. So one is just about batching, right? I will use myself as an example, but I would be curious in the chat about you all. I'm someone who is naturally a night owl. If you put me in a period of over a week where I have no responsibilities, I will naturally start going to sleep at around 3 a.m. Why? Because that's just my natural cycle. Of course, during daily life, I can't organize my life around going to sleep at 3 a.m. But what that does mean is that the morning is not the best time for me to do certain tasks. Why? because my brain is not happy for me to be awake at that point in the day. So, what are tasks I can do then where I feel like my brain is prepared? Sometimes that's organizing the day first and responding to small, easy things, or looking, if I were in your shoes, looking across my courses. Okay, what's the course where I feel the most comfortable with? Can I do that work at this time? Or what is a type of task? So I feel comfortable talking on the discussion board. Let me say that Tuesdays every week, that's my day in all of my classes. I'm just going to put my original post on each discussion board and each course I'm in. I'm batching those tasks. Um, so what that allows you to do is use periods where you have high energy to prep for periods where you have low energy. So I know my energy is naturally highest at night. I'm going to do things at night to prepare myself for the morning. So the easy things that you can see this that some of you may be doing without thinking about it. Are you a nighttime showerer or a morning showerer, and why? Or do you lay your things out the night before for the morning? Do you know what you're going to wear the next morning because you set it out the night before? For me, I do those things because I have more energy to make those decisions. I feel more resilient at the end of the day rather than in the morning where my brain is like, why am I awake? Why am I seeing the sun? This is related to batching. So it's the idea of chopping the onions once. If you, for example, know that you are going to have multiple questions for your professor, send them all at once in an email, just once, rather than having the back and forth where you continue to return to the same stage. Or another example, you know that you are going to need to download a couple of resources to do an assignment. Well, grab all of them, right? So that you don't have to go back to that web page. Um, so batching small tasks and trying to do that full task at once when you have the energy can help avoid some of that task switching, which science shows actually costs you even more energy than just pushing through for a little while. But you'll notice I said for a little while. On the other end, if you've heard of the Pomodoro technique, um, you know that your brain has a limit to how long it can focus on something. Um, and really the max limit is about 50 minutes, with a bit shorter being a good move. Some people say 25 even. So when you're having those 4-hour blocks of just studying with no break, you are getting diminishing returns because your brain is tired. And sometimes you can feel it if you're looking at a textbook. After a certain amount of time, your brain is just done focusing. The Pomodoro technique, which I'll show you more in a little bit, is all about giving yourself micro breaks so that your brain can recover, so that you are not using as much resilience. And again, leave room for joy and rest, please. So if you look at your time management plans and you see that there is no joy whatsoever for the next 15 weeks, this is me and Assistant Dean asking you to please find some room for joy. And we will try to send you in first year some opportunities for that, both synchronous and asynchronous, because you are not just here for a semester or for a course, most of you. You are here to get a degree. And that means we want you to be able to continue with that marathon without really feeling depleted. So I want to highlight one thing that's going to come out later, and I want to foreground this with the answer to a question I've received before. I'm talking about AI in part here, and Emily actually received this in a previous webinar. The question of, does this mean we have to use AI? The answer is no. And in fact, you will find that your courses, your professors will each have policies about how you can and cannot use AI in their courses. When in doubt, ask them. Because if you have looked at the academic integrity policy, you can see that some uses of AI, including ChatGPT, Claude, um, Copilot, all of the rest of them, some uses of those do count as cheating. So you're going to want to make sure, if you haven't already, make sure you look at the school's academic integrity policy and also look at your professor's policy for that class. And so you can see when you're burnt out, and remember, that's your out of resilience, the temptation is to microwave as much as you can. You have no energy left. So it can be tempted to use AI to just answer an assignment. Please don't do that. That is always considered to be cheating. If you just plug in the prompt and then plug out whatever it gives you, that is considered cheating. And I do not want any of you to get caught in that. But a substitute, depending on the policy and the course, is that you can use tools, potentially including AI, to help with the process. So, for example, if I'm in a course where I need to write a paper and that professor has allowed AI use for brainstorming, I can do that. If I'm in a math course and that professor has allowed AI, I can use ChatGPT to create new problem sets for me. Although you do, of course, want to be careful with this will be my last comment on it with AI, to make sure that you know enough to know if it is wrong, because of course all AI, all language learning models are sometimes wrong and do not know it. Um, Sometimes the temptation when you are burnt out is to just not submit an assignment. Substitute one, view rubrics when available to decide where you want to prioritize. Right? So you can look and see in courses, how much is it worth, or on your syllabi, um, how much is it worth, or how much does it hurt my grade if I don't respond to any of my classmates on this week's discussion board? I'm tired. What does that cost me in terms of my final grade? You can look in the course at the rubrics and see just what the cost is. And so you can decide, well, okay, you know what? Maybe this week I don't respond on the discussion board because I just don't have it in me. And instead, I put that energy into this paper that's worth 30% of my grade. However, before you ghost an assignment or your course, number 3, contact your professor at minimum. And if you're thinking about the course, contact your advisor. When I was in the classroom, I always wished that students would just ask me for an extension, not because I could always offer it, but because sometimes I could and I just needed them to ask me. So if you know 24 hours in advance that you are low on energy and as it stands, you are not going to be able to make a deadline, ask your professor, because the worst they can say is no, and that is the answer you are assuming when you don't ask. And lastly, sometimes the temptation, and I know I feel this one, is to overwork when you are already burnt out. And what that leads to is deeper burnout and ultimate collapse. And so instead, just like I was explaining, we're giving the example of with the discussion board, give yourself grace strategically. You do not have to be perfect. You have to be good enough or do enough, because it's not about how good you are, but you have to do enough in order to attain your goal. And in this case, your goal is this degree. What do you want to do after that? That impacts the level, the standard at which you need to hold yourself to. And that's why your purpose is key, because you need to know what you need to do in order to attain your purpose. And that tells you where you can give yourself grace strategically. So please avoid the things here, because I know I'm sure I'm not alone in the feeling that I just need to overwork. Who else will do it? Well, look at your resources. Can you reach out to a professor? Can you reach out to your advisor? Can you reach out to Emily and me? What resources can we give you or assist you with that will mean that it takes less energy to get your goals accomplished? And so more about giving grace. What does grace look like? Again, deciding now that a lower grade is okay this term. Planning for at least one thing to fall through and not panicking when it does. Knowing you're going to break a rule for yourself, e.g., no late work, and deciding which one is most survivable for you to break. So before I go to which is what does grace look like for you? Because I would love to see what you have to say in the chat. What I want to make sure I highlight is when I say knowing you are going to break a rule, I do not mean an institutional rule like academic integrity, because again, you are deciding which one is most survivable to break. So if you are caught breaking academic integrity rules and guidelines, that can lead to a 0 in the course or on the assignment. If it's particularly severe, it can lead to suspension. That's not a particularly survivable rule to break, right? But what are things that you can say, you know what, this is something I'm not going to do today. So if you have a rule for yourself that you are going to make your bed every morning, that is your rule. I'm going real light, and it's something that you've been doing for years. How survivable is it for you personally to not make your bed that morning? For some of us, we might be like, that's fine. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to save those 2 minutes. Thank you. For others, we are tied into our streak, and that is not a survivable rule to break for you because of how much importance it has for you. You need to decide which of the rules you place on yourself. If you are burnt out and you need to give yourself grace, which one can you best survive, tolerate breaking? So, question for each of you in the chat. Anyone willing to share? What do you think it might look like to give yourself grace? And what's a period that you can think of where maybe you could have given yourself this, just different ways to think about this? What's a period where you needed grace and you didn't give it to yourself? Or something you can think about might happen in the first week of the term, where if this happens, you know what? You'll be understanding for yourself. I can give you guys one idea, something that I think you should give yourself grace with. If you get into, yes, put some chores aside. That's a good one. What if you get into your courses and you realize you forget how to use the discussion board? Yes, giving yourself grace means knowing that everything is not in your control. Being kind to yourself when you can't stick to your schedule. Yes. I love this. Make a list of the top 4 things that you need to do and the rest. That's right. I love all this. Giving yourself credit for trying. That's so clear. Yes, beautiful. Asking for help when needed. These are so important. I hope you are all looking at what each of you is saying in the chat because these are so crucial. Yes, indeed. Yes, and someone just said, I'm not going to name you just because of the recording, but someone just said that they need to work on giving themselves grace because they feel they let themselves down a lot. Yes, that is relatable. And I'm going to take a moment now because I believe I've got enough time to take this moment. So I'm going to tell you all about something that we worry about in student services and student success lives. It's something that happens sometimes with transfer students, where you're used to one institution and you come to a new institution and everything is different. Things are different in ways you didn't know things could be different. And you sometimes students start to wonder, can I do this? I thought I knew what school was like. Why is it like this? This is so different. And sometimes students then leave. Why? Because they think they can't do it. Why? Because it's the first semester and you're having a hard time when you thought it was going to be easier because you've done school before. Why is it still so hard? Well, what does giving yourself grace look like? It looks like acknowledging, yes, you've done school before, but you haven't done this school before. You haven't done these courses before. You haven't done this school with the rest of your life the way it is right now before, right? So giving yourself grace is saying, you know what? Sometimes you don't know what you needed to learn. And now you know that this is something that you need to learn more about. Giving yourself grace is remembering that growth mindset. It's okay, this is hard now, but the beginning is supposed to be a bit tougher because it's new. And that's what giving yourself grace looks like. So you are very welcome for the reminder Tara, and I am glad to give it to you. You can always email me and I will give it to you again. Very gladly, because it is something that we struggle with all the time. So please give yourself grace. Look at the things that your classmates, your peers have said in the chat. Um, think about it. Maybe some of these things can help you give yourself some grace as well, because this is important. Okay. Yes, rest when you are tired. Exactly. How many times do we all say, you know what, I am so tired, but I just need to get this one thing done. If I just get this one thing done, and you do that, and then you say, but you know what, there's this other thing on my to-do list, right? And what happens to your energy then? What happens to your burnout then? So that's why grace is so important. Thank you all for sharing, because it's crucial. Yes, yes, exactly. Thank you, everyone. So I want to make sure that I give you some tools and some tips to help you. And I've got another window open to help. So I'm going to show you all of them. And I'm actually logged into one so that you can tell that I'm actually showing you things that I use to help myself, because this is not a situation where I'm preaching to you from on high. Like, I don't ever, my hair's pulled back, but I don't ever have to worry about this. No, I am still navigating these same issues myself. And so I am still looking and using for tools to help me with my energy management and figuring out how to use them best. So there's the Pomodoro technique, which I mentioned before. There are planning and organization platforms. I'm going to show you each of these: Notion, Habitica, or Zotero, which I am a big fan of Zotero. And if I could have each of you only look at one thing right now, it would be Zotero. And then school resources that can help support you. We will be focusing on those in the next webinar, so I'm not going to show you as many of those right now. But also think about changes to your environment. So, headphones and noise generators. If you have young, noisy children or need to go outside to work, I'm a big fan of mynoise.net, which I believe I got a lifetime subscription to many years ago for $5. Which allows you to just sort of say, this is what I want to listen to I want to listen to rain. I want to listen to a rainforest, things like that. But you can also find sound generators on YouTube. Body doubling platforms like FocusMate, which are particularly useful if you are neurodivergent, particularly if you are autistic or have ADHD. This is a situation where, let's say, you know that at 7 p.m. you're going to sit down and you're going to work on this paper, and you're at home in the house. You can go on to FocusMate, sign up, and have be in essentially a Zoom with someone else who has something to do at that hour. And the two of you are now working together separately. So that's called body doubling, and you can use that for schoolwork. You can use that for cleaning, for all sorts of things. So if you're someone who has a hard time getting things started, that can help. And of course, remember, you don't need to earn rest. So let's take stock of some of these tools, and I will show them to you over here. So in no particular order, um, this is FocusMate. Focusmate.com. So you can see you can join for free. Essentially, you would get five, I believe it's about 5 free sessions. You can pay, and I believe it's about $10 a month, 5 to 10. Of course, that if you're watching this video later, that may no longer be accurate. And I do indeed use this. In fact, the team got to watch me struggle to remember how to sign out because I'm always signed in. But so you can see the ideas at the beginning of the session. You say what you're going to do. You then sit there and you work. Whenever you realize that you are drifting off course, you're like, but someone can see me. If you really need some help, you can even share your screen so they can see if you are in your Word document or on, I don't know, TikTok. Though you would not be on TikTok on your machine. You get the idea. And it helps keep you focused. So this is FocusMate for if you're someone who really has a hard time just getting yourself to really settle when you are by yourself and you are the only person you are accountable to in the immediate time. Zotero, which is One of my favorite tools. It is free. The Baruch, the Newman Library, also periodically offers training. Essentially, what this allows you to do is as you go through your courses and you do your readings and you hopefully annotate your readings, you can put them in Zotero, you can tag them, and then either at the end of the course or when you hit capstone, even if it's years from now, you can say, you know what, I really want to write my capstone on uh, trauma and motherhood. And you would be able to look for everything you had ever put in the system for trauma, motherhood related topics, and you'd be able to see your notes if you put them in. So you don't have to start from scratch years later. You've already done the work. This is that chop the onions once, right? I already read this and annotated this. I already decided if it was useful or not. I put it in Zotero. I don't have to then read it like it's brand new to me 2 years later. And this can actually help you with your citations. So if you're someone who's nervous about citation style, this can help you do it. So this is one of my favorite free tools, and you can see it is available on all sorts of platforms. If you are someone who has a to-do list and you like to gamify it, Habitica is a gamified to-do list. Now, I am no longer someone who remembers my login for this because I needed a little bit more intensive nudging, me personally. But this essentially allows you to turn your to-do list into a game. You get like coins for doing things. So if you are someone who likes playing video games, this may be a to-do list platform that works well for you. And again, it is free. And I'm actually going to show you Notion, which I mentioned as a planning. I'm not going to show you in depth, but I'm actually logged into mine. So this is my Notion. You can organize this in the way that you want. Underneath something this simple, what I've done is, for example, I list everything that I have to do. I have it with a due date. I can click today's plan and it will show me only the things that I have said I need to do today or that are due today. So I put it in the system once and I'm done. The system then can go ahead and tell me, all right, here's what you said you needed to do today. You can have weekly plans, etc. You can have, for me, I have a brain dump. I have a scratch pad. And in this area, it's not built yet because everything's a work in progress, giving myself grace here. I will have things that I find grounding. So when I am feeling like my battery is low, what do I put here? And you can see I started by just having quotes. So these are all potential tools. Lastly, Pomodoro. That's come up a couple of times. And I want to show you one Pomodoro timer. But if you just Google Pomodoro, you can find them. So you can see this one has you working for 25 minutes. And then you can take either a short break for 5, or the rule is every 3 Pomodoros, take a slightly longer break. And so you can also use this, but you can see that you can actually integrate all of these into each other. So everything I just showed you is either free point blank, like this is just a free Pomodoro timer, has a very robust free version. So I built all of this with free Notion, and I built it because it was the way that my brain works. Habitica has a free version that you can go ahead and make. Zotero is free, and you can have a certain number of FocusMate sessions without paying a dime. So I wanted to make sure I showed you those because we promised you tools. And these are some outside of the school tools and resources that you might find help you. I use Notion. I cannot show it to you, but I will, because it would show school's business, but I will tell you about one thing that you can do. And this is about figuring out how tools can work best for you. I have my Notion set so that if I'm in a period where I am really not giving myself much grace, but I do need to move forward, I can click this button and it will literally show me one thing that I marked as low stress to do. Yes, just do this thing and I'll do it. And so you can create these systems with free tools to help you manage your energy which therefore helps you manage your time. So, lastly, I do want to talk about some emergency meal planning. These are things that we are going to give you some resources and orientation about because we want you to be able to think later about what tools might you use? What is your kitchen metaphor if you think back into that beginning, right? When you look at your syllabi, for orientation or elsewhere, you'll see that there are key learning objectives. What are your objectives for the semester? What are the key things you want to be able to do? How are you going to, considering um, your goals and the fact that you need to give yourself grace, what is your own metric, your own rubric for success? And remember, if you are someone who does not give yourself grace, think of that first goal in your head and make that your stretch goal. And now give yourself a second goal that you say, you know what, I will be satisfied. Um, don't forget dessert. So here's the last bit. I want to tell you about CUNY Arts um, before we move on. And it looks like I might have logged out of it. Let me make sure that I did. Did. All right, I'm going to go to CUNY Arts. So CUNY Arts is a way, as long as you have a CUNY ID from any campus, you can access a great deal of cultural institutions, either free or low cost. I'm just going to scroll while I talk so that you can see. And you can see all of these things that are saying free for CUNY students, right? I got to see an opera when I was a CUNY student for free. I would have never seen an opera in my life, if not for that introduction, because that was just not something I was exposed to. So you can see there are so many opportunities that are available to you. All you need is a valid school ID. And these are things that if any of these sorts of things interest you, and you can see there are more cultural centers here, but if any of these interest you, these are also free to you. So remember that you have these opportunities as well. Remember also that preparing ahead is always best. So that's why when we talk about your courses, we say we think it's a good move to log in 3 times, 2 to 3 times a week. That first time is that preparing ahead time, seeing what's coming at you during the week across your courses so you can plan and decide what's going on in your life. When will you have the energy and the time to do which things? And at that, I do want to pause because I know I saw that there were some questions that I might be best to answer. And I also promised you that I would show you where that time management is. So let's go into orientation first. Um, Orientation here. Now I'm going to assume which orientation you are in. I'm going to assume that you are in this one. If you are not, please let me know within the Q&A. So there are multiple ways that you can get to different assignments. Um, the first way and the easiest, you can see I just went to the discussion board, scrolled down to planning your time, and there's the time management instrument linked here. It'll just download. I'll open it. We'll see how my Excel does in this moment. Here it is. So you can see this is what it looks like filled out. So this is your goal. And you can see on the bottom here, I'll zoom in a bit. Let me close this. You can see that once you fill this out from the available dropdown, it will tell you not just daily how many hours you're spending on different things, but weekly. And it'll show you then, what if you have no time allocated for something like housework? Well, is someone else cleaning the house for you? Because that might be possible. But if not, well, what are you going to do with that housework? Is 2 hours a week enough for your house to be clean? Right? Are you someone who could spend all of this time with no family time and just have family time on Saturday? These are, of course, questions for you to answer, not us. But this is why we ask you to do this assignment, because this is how you see the areas of your life where how much are you sacrificing? Um, so that's how you find that. You can also go into the unit. So I will go into content. And I believe it is in module 2. Yes, module 2, goal setting and time management. So this is where you'll go. And I suggest if you haven't done this first, you go here so that you can read this. The time management instrument is also linked here. Um, if you have a conflict with webinars, just send us an email. If your conflict is with, for example, your major, we will tell you to go to your major's webinar. But please do reach out to us first. Um, do most professors do a virtual meeting once during the course to meet the class? So we have no, unless you are in a course that's marked as hybrid, we do not have mandatory virtual meetings. However, all of your professors have a weekly office hour. Some of them will actually use those to provide lessons that they think will be helpful to the class. But you yourself are always welcome to go to your professor's office hour, meet them, and have a conversation. And professors always wish that you would. Um, there is a question here about paying for courses. Send us an email because what I will do is I will speed your question over to the bursar and get you an answer. So please send that to us. And I will make sure that you can see our email, but it's orientation@sps.cuny.edu. Um, Next question. So someone has asked, how many questions seem too much in a semester? Some of this really depends on, well, all of this, honestly, really depends on your life. So this, unfortunately, is not something that I can say 5. Um, it depends. And so that is why we want you to do this. So you need 9 to 12 hours per week per 15-week course. If you're in a 7-week course, double it. If you're in a 3-week course, double that. And if that sounds like a lot of time, this is why we have peer mentors in orientation. Ask the peer mentors if that seems about accurate to them. Because then the question becomes, how many multiples of 9 can you fit into your life right now? Comfortably, thinking about everything that we've just discussed. And that's the amount of courses that ideally you would take. If you don't have the time for the courses, then you start needing to think about, well, how will I manage burnout? How will I manage, like in this example, the fact that I have allotted myself no family time any day but Saturday? So it's not a number, it's really sort of a conversation. And while part of me is like it's a conversation with yourself, it is not necessarily just one because you can talk to us, you can talk to your advisor, you can talk to the peer mentors to get guidance, more information, because also some of it will depend on how comfortable you are with the material. So all of my degrees are in English. I need less time for an English course than I would have needed for chemistry. Um, so I'm sorry that I cannot give you a number there to the person who asked that question. Another person asked, is 24 hours before the set deadline to request an extension? What happens if it's less than 24 hours? So essentially, the reason I say 24 hours is because you should expect up to 24 hours before you hear back from your professor. So if you ask less than 24 hours in advance of the deadline, there is a possibility your professor won't see your email. And so emergencies happen, and your professors know that. If an emergency has happened, send the email when you can. It's an emergency. But if you know in advance that you may need a deadline or an extension to the deadline, ask when you know you may need it rather than when you know you definitely need it. And you can frame it just like that. You're like, hello, professor. There's something going on in my life. I think it's possible I may need an extension. Could I have an extra 24 hours or 48 hours to submit this assignment? And then use it if you need it. Don't use it if you don't. And that was the last question in the QA. Um, so we don't really have time to discuss it, but this is something that I hope you all will think about. We've been thinking about, oh, I see. Diana, you went to the symphony? Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. See, like there's so many things that I know I myself, I'm born and raised in the Bronx, working class family. I would have never done those things. And so it really opened my eyes to opportunities that I would have never known. And that gave me energy and motivation to keep going. Thank you for sharing, Diana. So I want to thank all of you also for coming. Um, and I'm so glad I see someone who said that you're used to Notion, but in a group setting. Yes, like in a recorded webinar, I'm not going to show you the ins and outs of my Notion, but maybe what I'll do next week is I'll set up an office hour for people who are curious and I can show folks a little bit more. Or if you are interested, send us an email. And I can see if I can't set up a time that I can show you. I'm a beginner, but I can still show you what I've done this far. I'm happy to do it. Um, my goal for each of you is that you end up feeling like your kitchen looks more like this than that picture in the beginning. This is what I hope for. But remember, give yourself grace in the beginning of the semester. You are not expected to have your life look like this your first term. So please don't expect that of yourself. And as promised, this is the email where you can continue to reach out to us. So please, please do. Um, After orientation, we will make sure that you also have our first year email because you can reach out to us, and I hope you reach out to us, not just during orientation, but throughout your first year. And in fact, I love to hear from y'all afterward because I especially like to be foolish when you guys get to graduate. So please do let us know. And lastly, I think someone is going to pop this in the chat. If time management is something that you are really worried about, Student Services is actually offering a series of 3 webinars during the term um, on time management. So in addition to our Start Strong resources this week, during the term, there are also additional webinars for you on time management. We will also make sure that information is in the orientation site. So there is always more. Thank you so much for joining us. Please have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Take care of yourself and give yourself some grace if you can. Bye, everybody.